Okay, so Prasad, can you please open our calculator API project, please, so that we can quickly go through different settings we have done so far, and then we will revise. How we have configured our calculator API project, how we have integrated Maven and Nexus, what all things we did right. So those things we will discuss. Settings XML, what changes we did in settings XML, what changes we did in form XML, and what command we executed that day to release our library jar file to the Nexus. So let's quickly revise the things. So basically we created one Maven hosted repository. We have already discussed difference between hosted and proxy repositories. Okay, so hosted repository is the repository which is used to hold the artifacts, different kinds of artifacts. Currently we are dealing with Maven repository, but going forward when we will learn Docker, so we would be creating Docker repository to hold Docker images. When we will learn Kubernetes, we would be holding Helm repositories for holding Helm charts. So Nexus, using Nexus we can create different kinds of repositories. So we have created a Maven repository which is used to hold Java artifacts, jar files. So we did few configuration settings in our POM XML. So just scroll down, Prasad. Just scroll down. Correct. Wait a minute here. Now here we see a distribution management tag. So inside this distribution management, we configured a repository tag. Inside the repository, there are two main settings we have provided. One is ID. Now the value of this ID can be anything. I will just explain what is the purpose of this ID tag here. But the URL is the very important setting over here. So this URL tag contains the URL of our Nexus repository, the hosted repository which we have created. When we created our hosted repository, we did few settings, like for example, we disabled the redeployment. We also had discussed what is the purpose of this redeployment, when it should be disabled, in which cases it should be enabled, and all that. Then there is one blob store also which is allocated to our repository, so that also we had done. Then we had created two users. Okay, basically we created two roles and two users. So roles are nothing but basically you can club the permissions together under a particular role, and that role you can assign it to the user. So user which gets the particular role assigned gets all the permissions which are defined for that particular role. So we created two roles. One is junior DevOps engineer role and another one is senior DevOps engineer role. A junior DevOps engineer should only be able to browse the repository, and he should be able to download the artifacts pushed to the repository, wherein he will not be able to push any new artifacts because he is a junior DevOps engineer. So whatever the contributions he do in the team, he doesn't require to push any new artifacts. He only would be downloading or consuming the artifacts. So that's why we only provided him the the respective permissions. Then we created senior DevOps engineer role, and to this particular senior DevOps engineer role we assigned permissions like reading, browsing, as well as editing. That is, the person who possesses this role, he would be able to download the artifacts, he would be able to browse also, and he would also be able to push the new artifacts. So this we have already seen, we have discussed a lot around these concepts. Then we configured this repository, the hosted repository, here in the calculator API project using this distribution management. Now here, this particular repository, whenever we will access this particular repository, we cannot access the repository as an anonymous user. Anonymous user means the user who doesn't provide any username and password. Okay, that is called anonymous access. So we have not granted anonymous access to our repositories, hence it should always be accessed with the help of valid credentials. Now through Maven, now what we are planning to do is we are going to run different Maven build life cycle on our project. Like for example, MVN compile, which will compile our source code, MVN test, which will compile our unit test code, and then it will execute the unit test cases also. MVN package will package our application code in the form of jar file, and this particular jar file would be ultimately pushed to our repository. So that is our target. So we want to release this particular jar file. We used to release this particular jar file inside a local repository before introducing this concept of Nexus. But the problem with pushing it to the local repository is that the jar file gets installed inside the local repository which is available on a particular machine. So the projects which are on that particular machine having that local repo present only can use the libraries installed over there. But the projects which spanned across multiple machines, they cannot use this jar file or the libraries installed in the local repo, and hence we introduced a concept of remote repo. But this remote repo, instead of creating it over an internet in some on some websites like mavenrepository.com and all, so we decided to host Nexus on our machine, and on that Nexus, or in that particular Nexus, we created different repositories, remote repository. So we created that remote repository and we configured that remote repository in our calculator API projects POM.xml. So when we will run mvn deploy, so what will happen is it will compile our source code of the application. It will compile the source code of our unit test cases. It will execute all our unit test cases which we have configured, right? In like we configured our Surefire plugin, and to that Surefire plugin we have configured our testng XML. So everything defined in that testng XML, all the test classes, all the test cases defined in those test classes will get executed. A report would be generated, and once the unit tests are completed and passed, it will move on to the next phase, that is mvn package, which will create a jar file inside the target directory, and this particular jar file would be deployed to our this repository, maven repository. Now who does this job of deployment of our jar file to the Nexus repo? A deploy plugin. So deploy plugin is responsible for pushing our jar file to the repository, our Nexus repository. Now this deploy plugin, when it will try to push the jar file to our repository, it needs to access the repository. That is but obvious. But to access that repository, our deploy plugin needs the credentials, because our repository can only be accessed through valid credentials. Now this deploy plugin, when it will try to access this repo, this also needs the credentials. Without that it won't be able to push the jar file there. So we created one XML file that day, which is settings.xml. So Prasad, can you please open settings.xml on your machine? So settings XML is an XML which defines the settings for Maven. So Maven has some default settings defined. For example, local repository. So local repository is always inside the current user directory .m2 folder. So your current user, which is the users, your username, this is your current user directory. Inside that you will find one .m2 folder. Inside that you will find repository folder, and inside that you will see your local repository is maintained. But if you want to change this location, this default location, if you want to change, then you can override those all default values using settings XML. So settings XML is very important and powerful file, I would say, for Nexus. Okay, so this settings XML defines different settings which you want Maven to use while it will perform different tasks. So in this settings XML, we created server stack. Inside the server stack, we created a particular server entry, and inside this server entry, we configured the username and password to access our Nexus application or our Nexus repository. So how we have configured this particular server entry, let's understand. Inside a server entry, we see there is an ID tag. And below that ID tag we have defined username and password. So this username and password is the these are the credentials for that user which has all the required access to our repository. Required access means the access to push the artifacts, access to browse the repository, access to even download the artifacts. So all these required types of accesses are provided to the user, and that user's credentials we have configured here in this settings XML, and this credentials has got one ID associated with it, which is my-repo my-repo-id. This is the same ID we have configured in our POM XML. So Prasad, can you go to the POM XML so that we can understand the relationship between the two? So here on line number 33 we see that same ID mentioned. So what happens is, when you will run mvn deploy, and your deploy plugin, once after the completion of rest of the like build phases, it will try to push the jar file to the Nexus repo. It will try to access that Nexus repo. What it will do is, it will read this ID which is defined in this POM XML. It will go to the settings XML. Go to the settings XML, Prasad, so that let's understand the relationship. It will go here. It will check which server entry. You might have different server entries here to configure different users. No, you can configure different user credentials using different server entries. So which server entry would be used to perform the deploy operation, how it will get those credentials? It will read the ID there in the POM XML, which is configured for that particular URL, repository URL. It will read that ID. It will come here in the settings XML. It will check which server entry has that same ID which it has read from the POM XML, and it will take the username and password, and using this username and password it will try to access our repository, right? So we have already done these things. So Prasad, can you please start your Nexus server if you have not yet started, so that
Yes.
I can show you can start your Nexus server. Nexus space /run. So let's see the repos, like let's see the jar file. That jar file has already been pushed there. And now what we are going to do is, we are going to configure our consumer project. As of now, what we have done is, we have configured our calculator API project, so that the package which we have created, that package we have successfully pushed to our Nexus repository. Our next target is our consumer project. Our consumer project, it should be able to download the jar file from the from this particular repository, and that jar file should be connected to that consumer project. So that is our next target. So we are going to configure this same repository which we just to which we just pushed our jar file. So that same repository we are going to configure inside our consumer project, and that consumer project we are going to make it we are going to make it download the jar file from that. So just access the Nexus dashboard. Yes, correct. Just log in with any credentials you can log in. Just log in with admin credentials, no problem. Admin and the password. Correct. Click on sign in and go to the browse on the left hand side. On the left hand side, browse. Correct. Go to the Java library repo. Correct. So these are the two versions we have deployed here, 4.0 and 5.0, right? So these are the jar files which we have deployed here to our Nexus repo. Now our next target is to configure our consumer project. Now go to the Eclipse, Prasad. Correct. Now go to the Eclipse and go to the consumer project. POM XML. Correct. Now this particular project, currently this particular project by default, if it needs any dependencies, let's say calculator. Now just scroll down. We have defined our calculator API. Correct. Now wait a minute here. Wait a minute here. This is a dependency we have defined. Okay. Now this particular dependency, when you try to build this particular project, consumer project, so whenever you define any dependency, okay, in its dependencies section, what Maven does is it checks if the particular dependency is present in the local repository or not. If it is present in the local repository, then it connects that particular dependency to the project. Okay, but if it doesn't find the dependency in the local repository, then it goes to the remote repository. Now when I say remote repository, what is the default remote repository for any Java, any Maven project? A default remote repository is mvnrepository.com. That is the default remote repository. That is where it downloads the dependencies from to your local repository first, and then from local repo it connects those repositories to you, connect those jar files to your project. But now what we actually want to do is, instead of this project, instead of asking this project to download the jar file or to look for the jar file in mavenrepository.com, we are going to ask it to look into our repository. Our repository, our Nexus repository. Our Nexus repository contains the calculator API jar file, which the calculator API build phase has pushed it there. Now that is the same repo we want this particular consumer project to refer to get the jar file downloaded from. So try to understand the scenario. Our calculator API project is the producer of the library. So it has produced the library and it has pushed it to the Nexus repo. Now the consumer project who wants that library needs to download that library from that repo. The same repo it should refer to, or it should go and download the jar file from. So that same repo, one project is using that repo to push the jar file to, and another project is referring to that same repo to get the jar file downloaded from. So single repo the use of single repo, one is doing to push the jar file to, and another one is using that same repo to download the jar file from. So this is the scenario. Now let's see how can we configure our Nexus repo in this consumer project POM XML so that the jar file would be downloaded from our Nexus repo. Okay, now I'll tell you, just a minute. I'll just send you configuring Nexus repo as a repository. There is one tag actually which we need to put. Just a minute, I'll tell you now. Yes, now see, I'll tell you now. I'm sending you one snippet, Prasad. You just take this
Okay.
and put it in the POM XML. I'll tell you where you need.
Entire tag, right?
Repository, entire repositories tag.
Okay.
Repositories, correct. Copy this
And
just scroll down. After the dependencies, before build tag. Correct. Yes.
okay.
Correct.
Dot.
Now just remove those dots from there. 51 and 57. Correct. Now here the ID again. What is going to happen is that this particular this particular project Maven is going to access our repository. It is going to access our repository to download the jar file from. So in this URL line number 54, you have to mention our repository's URL. So go to the settings, correct? No, on that correct, repositories, Java, and then just copy this URL. Correct. Go and just paste it here. Perfect. So we have defined our repository.
Should I remove this last slash?
That's fine. That's fine. That yeah, you can remove it also. That's absolutely fine. Correct. Now, what we are telling is to this particular project that whenever you require any dependencies, okay, so just check those dependencies in the local repo first. If it's not there, if any of the dependencies is not available there, then go to this repository and download the dependencies from here. That is what we are telling. Okay, now in order to access this repository, we need the credentials again. The way for pushing we need credentials, for downloading also we need credentials, there is no doubt. Okay, for downloading also we need credentials. So how can we provide those credentials? In the same way we provided our calculator API ID. So go to the settings XML, copy that same ID. No, not entire tag, just the value of that ID tag, my-repo-id. Correct. Copy this and put it here. You can put the same value in the name tag also. This name tag is not required. Line number 53. Copy it. It is already there in your clipboard, and put it for the name also. This name tag is not required. It is
so
optional.
it is okay.
So you can remove it. Yeah, you can remove it. No problem. Save it. Correct. Now wait, I'll tell you now what you need to do. Go to your local repository. Now your local repository is not in C users M2. It's in, we changed the location. Go to the settings XML. I'll tell you what is your location. D
Okay.
my local repo is your no, it is already opened in the notepad.
Okay.
See this D my local repo. This is the location you need to go to. Go to this location D colon.
In command line, right?
No, no, not in command line. In the file explorer.
Okay.
D my local repo.
Yes. Yes.
Correct. Prasad. You can remove that Prasad directory, entire directory. You can delete that. Delete this. Correct. Now go to your consumer project. Correct. And right click on this consumer project. Let it download the dependency now. Right click. Maven. Maven. Update project. Okay. Click on OK. Correct. Now it will download. Now go to the Explorer, File Explorer. Now you can see Prasad. Go inside that Prasad. Calculator API
Oh,
4.0. So it has downloaded it from where? It has downloaded it from our Nexus repository. Now let's see whether it indeed downloads it from there or somewhere else. I'll tell you like how can we verify this. Go to the Nexus repository. Go to the browse on the left hand side. Correct. On the click on that. Correct. Go to the browse. Delete this 4.0. Delete this. Delete component. Yes. So we deleted this particular artifact from our remote repository. Okay. Now go to your local repo. Delete this Prasad directory again. Now go to the Eclipse and update project. Right click.
okay. Again.
Update project.
Maven. Okay.
Was it?
See, it is giving us the error. Do you see? Red sign.
Um,
It is saying that missing artifact. Meaning what? This particular artifact it didn't find in the local repo, and it
um,
also didn't find it on the remote repo. Here also it didn't find it in
um,
Nexus. That's why it gave us the error. So this indeed uh, proves that our Maven is going to this particular Nexus repo to get the artifacts downloaded. Now let's make this version as 5.0.
but sir, we have also like updated policies. Like we will not use the older
No, but we
versions.
are not pushing. Wait. That policy is for that calculator API, which is pushing. It
Hmm.
doesn't limit the project to use it. If the see there is a okay, I understood what you said, but that redeploy policy you are talking about, right?
Hmm.
So that policy is for that calculator API project, which is going to push the artifact, not for this consumer. Consumer is not pushing anything. Consumer is simply downloading the artifact available there on the repo, and it is simply using it. So that redeploy policy is not applicable for consumer. It is applicable for producer, the project which produces the library. Are you getting my point? So
So
that
both are different projects. That's why, right?
yeah, both are different projects and both are doing different stuff. One is creating the library and another one is simply using the library. That policy, that redeploy policy, that saves the library from getting overwritten. So who can override the library, consumer or producer? Consumer is not building any library and pushing it, right? producer is doing this. So our calculator API is producer project. So that calculator API which is creating the jar file and pushing the jar file, for that project should not be able to overwrite the jar file, and for that purpose we define there the redeploy policy. That is not for consumer project. Consumer project is not doing any harm. It is simply downloading the jar file and using it.
So we
That
can download the for 4.0 version multiple times, right?
ah, in fact it will not get downloaded multiple times. See, I'll tell you. It will only get downloaded once. Once it is there in the local repo, then the jar file or the library doesn't get downloaded again. It gets downloaded only and only if the local repo doesn't find it or doesn't have it. Only
Mm.
once the jar file gets downloaded, not multiple times anyways. Are you getting
So,
my point? So 4.0 will get downloaded once, and it would be connected to your project. If you define version as 5.0 as a dependency here, the 5.0 would be downloaded, but that is only once, not every time. Now you
mm,
can go to the file explorer. Go to the file explorer. You can check now that 5.0 is downloaded now. Go inside this. Go inside this. Uh, 5.0 it should be actually. Why it is shown as
zero.
can you just go to the calculator API, sorry, consumer project, and did you save this file?
Yes,
Save this once.
already
Delete
saved
this.
it.
Okay, just delete that local repo. I mean the Prasad folder. Correct, and update the project. Go to the did you update the project?
Yes,
Can you do it once?
Maven update project.
Force update. Wait. Force update.
Okay.
Now go to the file explorer. Uh, can you just go back to the D colon and come inside the directory? Okay, I think it is connected to your project. That's why it is not downloading it again somehow. Go to the Maven dependencies on the left hand side. No.
No,
Here,
dependency.
correct. Here your project is okay. Let's do one thing. Let's release calculator API 6.0 and connect this to the project. Go to the calculator API project. Go to the POM XML. Go up and make it 6.0. No, not there. Line number 8. Correct. Now save this. Correct. Now open command prompt.
Ambient clean.
Open a new command prompt. Let's not touch this one. Otherwise our Nexus server will get shut down. Go inside your calculator API project directory using cd command. Type
Yes.
mvn space clean space deploy. Now it will release our 6.0 version. Enter.
Yes.
Now go to the Nexus.
Refresh.
Yes.
Yes,
Right,
present.
6.0 is here. Now go to the consumer.
Okay. Update project.
No. Go to the consumer. Consumer's form XML.
Hmm.
Make this version as 6.0. Save. Correct. And now update project. Right click. Enable update project. Force update.
Force update.
Yeah. Now go to the file explorer.
Hmm.
Go
Yes.
to the Prasad directory, calculator API, and 6.0.
6.0.
Correct. Go inside that 6.0. Correct. So you
Yes.
can see your calculator API 6.0 is downloaded. Right. So the point is, wait. The point is, there are two different projects. Try to understand the scenario again. There are two different projects. One is creating a library, and another project is using that library. It is downloading the library from the remote repository and using it. So these are two different projects. Their purposes are different, their requirements are different. So in one project the repository is configured to push the artifacts to, and in another project the repository is configured to pull the artifacts from. So one is pushing the artifact, another one is pulling. And the redeploy policy is the one for the project which is pulling the artifact, pushing the artifact, not for the one who is pulling. डाउनलोड करायला त्याला काही प्रॉब्लेम नाहीये. The point is, what problem we try to resolve with that redeploy policy is that no one should be able to override the already pushed artifact. That is the main reason behind setting up that particular policy. Right? Clear? Any questions here so far? I hope it is clear. If we have any questions or any confusions for that matter, we can discuss those if anyone has. Yes, Priya, Sachin, Vindashish, Pranit, Prasad, any questions or any confusions?
I have one question regarding the setting file. In that setting file, we mentioned username. So which username we have taken? Because last time we created two users.
Correct. Okay. So you have to mention the username which has the access to download the artifact. Now that other user which you, if you remember the other one, which is part, which has that junior DevOps role assigned, that role has the permission to download. If we configure that also no here, also that is fine. So we can do that. I mean, let's do one thing. Prasad, just go to that settings XML
Hmm.
and just a minute, copy the server entry, the entire server entry. Correct. Copy it and paste it below the first server entry. No, inside that file itself. Correct. Create a new line. Correct. Paste it. Paste it exactly below the first server entry. The indentation should be correct.
Okay.
No. Take it one indent inside. Correct. Now it is correct. Now wait. Let's give some different ID. So let's say the first one should be senior, right? So first one is senior DevOps engineer. So let's give an ID as senior DevOps engineer for the first entry. No, for the first entry I'm talking about.
Username.
ID. I am talking about the ID. Correct. So make it junior JR, and the for first one make it senior ID. Now the first server entry I am talking about. Yes. So change the ID to senior. Okay. Now this Prasad underscore SR is from the senior, and just configure junior user's ID here. Username and password, I mean. What is the
Yes.
username and password? This is the one, right?
Hmm.
Correct. Wait, save here. And now go to the consumer project first. Not
Hmm.
consumer, calculator project first. Calculator.
Form XML.
Correct. Now here, just scroll down. Now this particular project needs the push access, because this is going to create the library and it is going to push it. So we need senior's credentials here, because senior DevOps engineer has the push access, whereas junior doesn't have. So mention the ID of senior here, SR. Correct. Save this and go to your consumer project, consumer's POM XML. And here we are going to pull, we are not going to push. So we need read access only, which is there for junior. Correct. So we configured two different users and we provided their credentials to the different projects according to their needs. So the calculator API, which is going to push the artifact, needs the push access or write access, which is there to the senior DevOps engineer, and the pull access is there for the junior. Now let's release one more 7.0. Go to the calculator API, make it 7.0, save this, and then correct, save this, then go to the command prompt and run mvn clean deploy. Correct, build is success. Now go to the wait, go to the NexusRepo,
Okay.
refresh.
Hmm.
Now go to the calculator consumer project.
So,
No, consumer project. No, don't do anything here. Go to the consumer project in Eclipse I am talking about.
okay. Hmm. Form
Go to the
XML.
POM XML of the consumer. You made it 7.0. Okay. Make it 7.0. You already did it.
Hmm.
Okay, you already did it. So it has already downloaded it also. So download has also been done and push has also been done. So Pranit, to answer your query, for this particular project we provided junior's credentials, and for the calculator API we provided senior's credentials, right?
Okay.
You understood it, no? Like we configured two server entries there. Now go to the settings XML for a minute, Prasad. Correct. So if you see, there are two server entries. One ID is senior, which has the username and password of the user which has the push access.
Yes, for the
And the
senior.
second server entry with the ID junior has the username and password for the user who has only the read access.
Mm-hmm.
And accordingly we provided those in the POM XMLs also. So this is the right approach. So basically the consumers, they should use the user who has the read access only, not the write access. And the calculator API, or the one which wants to push the artifact, they should use the user who has the write access.
Mm-hmm.
So this is the perfect approach. Correct?
Yeah. Can you show that consumer
Form.
form XML? Yes. How
Yes.
we
Go
added?
to the form XML.
Yeah. Here I can see only for the junior, but do we need to add senior also here?
Not here. No, no, wait. Not here. Because this particular project is a, which project is this? Consumer? Correct.
Yes.
Consumer, no. So consumer needs only the read access. So junior, only one user should be mentioned here, not the senior. If you mention senior, that is also fine, because that senior person has read access, write access, all kinds of access he has. But ideally you should not do that way. Ideally you should have two different users created, two different roles created, and you should provide only the minimum required accesses. So the junior person should have only read access, senior person should have all the accesses. So in the consumer project you should use junior user, and in the producer or API project you should use senior. That way,
Mm-hmm.
not
But in
that
the
way.
last time, in the previously we mentioned
Senior.
same for both, right? Yeah, senior.
Correct. Why? That's what. Why? Because that senior has the access, all kinds of accesses. Okay.
Okay.
If you use senior here, no, for consumer, that also will work, because our senior person has read access also. He has write access also. He has browse access also. He has all kinds of accesses. That's why it is working. But ideally it should not be in that way. You should have two different users, and consumer should use junior and calculator API should use senior.
Mm-hmm.
Because your consumer, right now we are the developers of both the projects, right, currently, but in real time scenario you are the developer of library calculator API project, but the consumer project developers would be different ones. Okay, they should not have access to change your repository in any way. They should not have access to change your repository in any way. They should only be configuring junior user in their POM XMLs. Otherwise, accidentally, if they do MV and deploy, then their artifacts would be pushed to our repository accidentally. That we do not want to allow, right? So
Mm-hmm.
that should not be the case. The one who are using your repository, artifacts from your repository, they should only be referring the user who has only read access, not write access, only read access.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise
Okay.
accidentally they might change your content of your repository.
Yes.
This is called RBAC, guys. RBAC means role based access control. Means role based access control. Okay, I'll tell you, there are two main concepts. One is authorization, authentication, and another is authorization.
It is the
Authent
same like WhatsApp group or admin how they can
Correct,
do.
exactly. So
Mm.
authentication means whether you are a valid user or not, whether you should be allowed to enter into the application or not. That is authentication. But let's say you are a valid user, but are you admin to the group? If you are admin, then you would be given some privileges which the normal user will not have, right? So authorization means you should be able to do those things which you are entitled to do, and you should not be able to do those things which you are not entitled to do. That is called authorization. And RBAC is role based access control, is the way to provide authorization. Particular user should be only be able to do this much of things, and he should not be able to do other things. Okay, least required privileges should be given. Means if someone only requires to download, then why are you giving him the write access? You should only give him the read access. Least privilege should be given. always. Correct?
Yes.
Yes. Any questions here so far? Anyone?
No.
We are good? Okay.
Yes.